I freaking love Anne of Green Gables. As a child, I tore through that book series like it was my job. The iconic Anne of Green Gables. The incredible sequel, Anne of Avonlea. The disappointing Rilla of Ingleside. They really did start falling off once Anne got married.
Oh my god, bro.
Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck, man? Get your ass on.
Anne Shirley remains an iconic character for me. She's spunky, flawed, funny, and engaging. What Little Women's Jo March was for American tomboys, Anne Shirley was for us up north. Bonus points to L.M. Montgomery for giving us 4 whole books of Anne being married to Gilbert, the biggest ship of the series. Louisa May Alcott could never.
No, for real, don't play like that. Are you serious?
I'm also a big fan of shoujo anime, the genre that's targeted towards teenage girls. I grew up on movies like Spirited Away and Howl's Moving Castle, and at 13, I graduated to mature fare, like Fruits Basket, Ouran High School Host Club, and Lovely Complex. What I didn't know as a teenager is that Anne of Green Gables is basically a shoujo manga. Anne is a kind-hearted orphan who wins over the hearts of those around her. She hits her love interest over the head when she first meets him, and they have a villains to friends to lovers arc throughout the course of the series. Gilbert is a handsome boy who likes her precisely because she's not into him right at the beginning. With the newest anime adaptation, Anne Shirley, being released this year, I thought I'd talk about the relationship between this iconic piece of Canadiana and shoujo manga. So for us to talk about this, we're gonna have to go back to the beginning. Yes, we do. Part 1. The beginning. L.M. Montgomery wrote Anne of Green Gables in 1905. Initially, she faced multiple rejections from major publishers. She eventually placed the manuscript in a hatbox and set it aside for 2 years. In 1907, she retrieved the manuscript from said hatbox and submitted it to L.C. Page & Company in Boston, and they accepted it and it was published in 1908. This launched an instant bestseller that would become a cornerstone of Canadian literature.
Talented, brilliant, incredible, amazing, show-stopping, spectacular, never the same, totally unique, completely not ever been done before.
Now, as Anne was taking over North America, the Meiji Restoration was happening in Japan. This reopened the country to foreign powers, but more specifically, missionaries.
So desu ka. So desu ka. So desu ka. So desu ka. So desu ka.
Loretta Leonard Shaw, a Canadian missionary and member of the Christian Literature Society of Japan, lived in Japan for 20 years and only left when World War II started. She introduced Anne of Green Gables to Hanoko Muroka, a Japanese English translator who translated the book in secret throughout the war. She would carry the manuscript with her during air raids, being fully aware that she risked imprisonment and even death if she got caught with the book from the enemy nation. Hanoko found solace in the book Anne of Green Gables, with the pastoral green settings and Anne's passion for literature resonating with her own childhood.
10歳の時に親元を離れて、で、カナダ人婦人宣教師の先生たちの下で徹底的な英語教育とキリスト教育を受けた。その当時の日本というのは女性が仕事をして生きていくというか、女性が自活していくっていうなかなかそういう環境ではなかったと思うんですけれども、花子はなんとか自分がペンを持って自立をしていきたいと思って。
Kathy Harano, a Canadian who later translated Hanoko's biography, stated in an interview with the CBC, "In some ways, Hanoko's life was a little bit similar to Anne Shirley of Anne of Green Gables. She wasn't an orphan, but her family was extremely poor, and they didn't have enough money to raise their children."
それで、東洋英和の寄宿舎の自分が送った学校生活と非常に似ていた。そこで、花子は、自分の運命みたいなものをおそらく感じた。これを、戦争中に少しずつ訳して、で、空襲警報が鳴ると、書きかけの原稿用紙と一緒に風呂敷に包んで、で、家族と一緒に防空壕に入って、また警報が解除されると、書斎で少しずつ訳すっていうのを繰り返していた。
In 1952, shortly after the Japanese surrender, Hanako Muroka published the Japanese translation of Anne of Green Gables. This translation is considered to be one of the best English to Japanese translations of all time, of any book. Take that, Tom Sawyer. She tailored the book to resonate with Japanese audiences and the conventions of shoujo literature. This type of stuff that was published and targeted at teenage girls, and what was the basis for most shoujo manga in the future. Muraoka self-consciously translated Aka no Anne Anne of Green Gables, to fit the literary conventions of Japanese girls' novels, whose roots date back to the girls' magazines of the late Meiji era. In the 1950s, the ration on paper was lifted following the war, and so at the same time that Anne was translated, there was basically a huge boom in publishing. The book resonated with the orphaned population following the war.
赤毛のアンの物語って、私戦争ともう究極に対極の、物語だと思うんです。向き合ってる現実とは違う中で、やっぱり人間にとって一番大切なものっていうのを見出したような気がするんですね。一番大切な家族だとか、友人やたちと一緒に笑ったり、泣いたりする、その平凡な日常がどれだけ尊いのか、そしてどれだけそれが脆いものなのかっていう、そしてその美しさっていうものをやっぱりすごく感じたと思いますね。
Anne's resilience in the face of adversity resonated with those left behind all of that devastation. Additionally, the US had vested interest in promoting the popularity of Western and more specifically North American culture to the Japanese population. In 1948, the Supreme Commander for the Allied Powers had decreed that it would only license foreign books if they demonstrably would further the objectives of the occupation. Essentially, the push for Western female authors to get Japanese translations was in part a propaganda thing. Anne of Green Gables has been a mandatory part of the Japanese public school curriculum since 1952. This means that all mangakas, so every single person who has written any type of manga, has likely read Anne of Green Gables at least once in their childhood. And so I believe that modern slice of life manga is inherently tied to the existence of Anne of Green Gables. The impact is undeniable. When reviewing the series, Vry Kaiser of Anime Feminist stated, "You can see traces of Anne in the evolution of shoujo and yuri. It's not hard to see future shoujo heroines in Anne's spirited approach to horrible circumstances. Anne's friendship with bosom companion Diana, meanwhile, fits right into the tradition of Class S that had been paved for some decades earlier by Yoshiya Nabuko."
1919 saw the publication of Nobuko Yoshiya's Two Virgins in the Attic. This book became the basis for the Class S genre of literature. This genre would center on romantic friendships between teenage girls. Class S literature would go on to heavily impact queer fiction in Japan.
Side note, there was actually a whole scandal in Canada in the 90s called the Bosom Friends Affair because Professor Laura Robinson published a paper where she postulated that Anne might have been a lesbian. People got so mad because they were like, "You're destroying the children. It's the gay agenda." Have you ever read these books? She does kind of give off, at least bisexual.
"I solemnly swear to be faithful to my bosom friend Diana Barry as long as the sun and moon shall endure."
You also have to remember that in the Victorian era, women were just like that with their friends. But I think it's also totally fair for people to have readings of the book where Anne is queer. It's crazy that this made front page news on the Globe and Mail, which is a very mainstream paper. Fuck, the 90s/early 2000s were crazy. I can't believe how toxic everyone was. Part 2. Anime adaptations. In the 1970s, a young animator named Hayao Miyazaki worked on an Anne of Green Gables anime adaptation. This was very early in his career, and the series was directed by future Studio Ghibli co-founder Isao Takahata. It ran for 50 episodes and is widely regarded as a favorite classic anime in Japan. It operated as sort of a blueprint for the Studio Ghibli films to come, and you can see a lot of the Ghibli aesthetic in this film. As this article states, many elements of Anne's story in Avonlea have been transferred over to the Studio Ghibli stories. The young sisters in My Neighbor Totoro, Mei and Satsuki, move to the countryside, just as Anne does, if for different reasons. But like Anne, they also benefit greatly from a childhood in the countryside, where they delight in nature and find community in their neighbors. A lot of the Ghibli films do mirror a lot of the story beats of Anne of Green Gables. The Ghibli protagonists, like Kiki and Kiki's Delivery Service, Chihiro and Spirited Away, they share that same sort of plucky fish out of water and yet still is able to win people over that Anne Shirley does. And additionally, a lot of those protagonists are actually the same age as Anne when she comes to Green Gables. This year, in 2025, the novel was adapted yet again as an anime series called Anne Shirley.
"I can't believe this is happening. I'm off to live on an island brimming with blooms."
I've been watching it. It's still not completely out yet. There's still episodes being released weekly. It reminded me of why I fell in love with the Anne of Green Gables books over 20 years ago. I love the animation, and the backdrops all look like beautiful paintings of Prince Edward Island. I also love how the voice actors for the English dub all have aggressive Canadian accents.
Mrs. Spencer said distinctly that you wanted a girl about 11 years old.
Diana, this is who I told you about.
And you can see how it's inspired by its predecessor, the 1970s anime adaptation. The characters are all designed in that similar Studio Ghibli art style with the crescent-shaped eyes and larger foreheads. This is the first Anne of Green Gables media I've consumed as an adult, and I forgot how funny Anne actually is. When I watched the first episode, I wrote down on my notes, oh, they make her unhinged and it's not like the book.
This wouldn't nearly be so hard on me if I hadn't seen The White Way of Delight. And of course, The Lake of Shining Waters.
But then when I went back to look at the book and just see, oh, how does it differ? Almost everything happens word for word. Like, it's over 100 years old, yet Anne feels like a character that could have been put in any shoujo manga, even one that happened yesterday. On watching it, it does feel like a very current story. And that's part of Anne's charm. Her characterization, how mischievous, imaginative, and fiery she is, makes her one of a kind. As historian David Wheel once reasoned, Montgomery's genius was her ability to create a truly universal heroine, relatable whether one lived in PEI, Japan, or Scandinavia. So when I was a child, I never actually made the connection between my love of manga and my love for Anne, but watching the series really solidified that connection in my mind. I'm just a sucker for an emotional, flawed, yet kind and courageous female protagonist. All that to say, if L.M. Montgomery hadn't published her book, maybe we wouldn't have this masterpiece.
It's a reverse harem! This is a reverse harem! There's debauchery here!
Part 3. The Kawaii Connection and Cottagecore. Additionally, the world of Green Gables is seen as kawaii, aka cute, romantic, beautiful, and that is a significant culture in Japan. I'm sure you already know this if you clicked on this video. And let's not forget that in 1950s Japan, urbanization was increasing rapidly. More and more people were moving to cities, particularly the newly dedicated capital of Tokyo. This led to a romanticization of rural life.
Anime and manga have proclivities towards slow-paced, naturalistic storytelling in these kinds of locales that rivals only like mid-20th century Eastern European cinema. What I find so interesting about this is that while it's so ubiquitous in manga and anime, it's not very common outside of them, not in Western cartoons or comic books, even though the countryside exists all over the world.
Even when looking at Sylvanian families or their correct name, calico critters, yes, I'm using the Canadian name, that's what I called them when I was 8 years old and collecting them, and that's what they are to me. I'm truly stuck by how much the calico critters / Sylvanian families aesthetic is just Canadian cottage country. Calico critters don't live in Japanese-style country houses where they all sit in the floor. They lived in Western-style, largely 20th century houses. I didn't even realize that they were a Japanese toy. I truly thought they were a Canadian creation. All the houses in their collections kind of look like Green Gables to a degree. Cottagecore takes huge inspiration from the Ghibli films, and whenever you see the aesthetic on social media, it's usually accompanied by the soundtracks of said movies. But where did you think Ghibli got this idealized romantic version of rural life? Anne of Green Gables. Which is funny because you never see cottagecore people in the winter, and those winters in PEI are pretty crazy. Part 4. The Canada of it all. It's always struck me as odd that while Anne of Green Gables is required reading for Japanese public school students, we actually have no such rule here in Canada, or at least in Ontario where I grew up. Canada definitely has love for the series, although I'd argue it's had less of a cultural impact here than it has in Japan. For some reason, stories about plucky young girls don't just seem to be very popular here. Anne with an E premiered on Netflix in 2017, and it did get good reviews, but I feel like it struggled with the issues that modern Netflix adaptations always have. It was canceled quite suddenly, and CBC stated that they would never work with Netflix again. I'm sure there was some drama behind the scenes, but that's what you get for working with an American company. Should have worked with a Japanese one. You can also visit L.M. Montgomery's house. It's a heritage site in Prince Edward Island. and it's quite popular for tourism. I've actually been there before when I was a young child of about 10 years old, and it really is as gorgeous and peaceful as the books make it seem. Funnily enough, most of the tourists who visit are Japanese, and they're usually younger women who have just graduated university and are entering the workforce and are trying to have a moment of childhood nostalgia before they go into the insane Japanese working culture. Kind of living an only yesterday moment. There was also a 1985 miniseries, a musical, and countless stage productions. You can look at the list. I'll put the list of all the adaptations here, but it's a lot. Part 5. My fan cast. It always surprised me that the later novels never got the same love as the first book. As a child, I read all of them, up to Rilla of Ingleside. And I think the later books could make for some iconic standalone adaptations. My personal favorite was the third one, Anne of the Island. In this arc, Anne, Gilbert, and some other friends go to university in Nova Scotia, and it's straight out of Jane Austen, right down to a rejected confession in the middle of the book. I truly believe that you could do this one alone without reading the rest of the series and still have a full experience. The Gilbert, Anne, Roy love triangle of this book was iconic, and it had me on the edge of my seat. So if I was to produce an adaptation, I would make it like a Canadian Bridgerton vibe. Very sensual, very intense, multicultural casting. Call me Shonda Rhimes because I'm swirling that shit up. It would go as follows. So I think for Anne, we should get Maitreyi Ramakrishnan from Never Have I Ever. And I know what you're gonna say. She's brown. She can't play Anne. F you. This is the Bridgerton cinematic universe. They could dye her hair red. Brown girls look amazing with red hair. And in this installment of the series, Anne is describing as having auburn hair anyway, so it's basically just henna. Maitreyi would eat at playing a fun, whimsical girly in college. I feel like she would be the perfect Anne. For Gilbert, I think Jack and Nanan could kill it. Gilbert is described as intelligent but also silly, and I think him and Maitreyi would have really good chemistry. Roy, the third leg of the love triangle, I think it would be fun to cast Vipul Vani from Boxcutter. Roy is described as being classically handsome with dark hair. He would fit that role perfectly. Diana Barry would be perfectly played by Iman Vellani from the Marvel movies. She's exactly how Diana is described. Case closed. For the times where Anne goes back to Green Gables, if they had Sandra Oh play Marilla, she would be such a good one. And if they had flashbacks to the first book or Anne's childhood, Paul Sun Hyung Lee would be the perfect Matthew, and then him and Sandra Oh would be siblings. It would be amazing. Call CBC right now. I got a movie to produce. Anyways, thank you again for watching. Please subscribe to my channel. I make videos about Canadian topics. I post monthly or whenever I can.